There used to be this YouTube channel called FGC Translated Alpha that would post clips of Nemo, Fudo, Mago, and sometimes they would post clips from Daigo, all fully translated. But over the years, these videos started to disappear. So today, there only remains 10 uploads to that channel, and they are all from the Street Fighter 6 era. There are no remaining Street Fighter 5 backlog videos, which is a shame because there were quite a few videos on there that had some great lessons that I had saved, but now they're all just dead links. And despite all of my efforts, I use things like Internet Archive, I just can't revive those videos. But there's one that sticks in my head. I don't have it, but I can give you the main idea because I think about it very often. I think about it a lot, and it's from Daigo when he's trying to learn Kage. He talks about how he's a slow learner, which was kind of hard for me to believe at the time, but as I've gotten older and actually read his book and watched more of his translated videos, I understand why he said that. In another translated video that is still live, Daigo gives some advice to a person writing in who talks about how throughout their life, they've been above average. They got good grades. They're great at work. They're like 7th at their company. But when it comes to Street Fighter, they're like a 1600, 1700 MR player. They don't want to be 10th place. They want to be first. They don't want to be master rank. They want to be legend. And no matter how hard they try to close that gap between them and the top players, they can't. And to quote the writer themselves, they said, "And lately, I've had a feeling that there's something more to it, and I just can't put it into words." Daigo responds with, "This isn't that uncommon," and then says, "I think this person's strong suits are memorization and imitation. And if that person writing in is a memorizer, then Daigo classifies himself as more of a theoretical type. And when someone who imitates or memorizes simply knows what works, someone that is theoretical knows why it works, and that there is a huge difference. But there's also a time difference." He goes on to give an analogy in which two people are asked to build a car. One is a memorizer and the other is theoretical. The person whose strength is memorization and imitation will finish the car first. They will be rewarded first. The person who is more theoretical might finish later and might even be punished. But if you asked for a faster car, only the theoretical person would be able to do that because they understand how every part of the car works. There are strengths and weaknesses to these two types of people. One gets rewarded faster and is more suited to a work or educational environment, while the other is rewarded later because it takes longer for their strengths to show and is more suited to creative endeavors. This is why it takes Daigo longer to learn a character. He has to understand how things work rather than just what will work. You're probably thinking, cool lesson, brother, but what about the FGC translated alpha video that you started with? And what about the Daigo method? Well, that video that's taken down that we started with starts with Daigo putting his controller down and then talking to the chat. And he says, "That's enough for today. You don't have to learn everything all at once." And then he goes into like a bunch more detail that I can't recall off the top of my head because I watched the video 3 years ago. But the reason it stuck with me so well, and I wanted to talk about it today, 3 years later, is because I started Street Fighter 5 at the end of 2019, which means by that point, the game was about 4 years old, which also means that people had these 4-year-long running documents on every single character that you could even think about playing. So I felt like I needed to play catch up. I joined these character discords and I clicked the little pin at the top, and then I'd open the Google Doc and I'd have 5 other people on it, a bunch of degenerates on there at 3 a.m. reading this 20-page manifesto on Chun-Li or something like that. And you'd just feel like you'd have to memorize and imitate everything as much as possible to get into fighting shape and to catch up with everybody else who's got this 4-year lead on you. It feels insurmountable at the time. They've got a 4-year lead on you, so you feel like you need to get all this information and cram it into one day, as little time as possible. And to be honest, you would be very surprised at how much you can actually memorize and how much you can actually imitate from other people. You get so good at it that it takes years. In my case, it took years for me to realize that what I was doing has a cap. Like eventually you will start playing people that are beating you not to death. You're not losing 0-10 anymore, 0-20 or 0-30, but just enough to where it hurts. Like the set maybe ends 8-14. The gap is still wide enough for you to feel the other person's strength relative to yours, and that you need to go further. And you really start to understand the difference between understanding how something works, or what works and how things work and why you want to use them. Let me give you a real example. I'll give you a real example right now in Street Fighter 6. So let's hop in the training mode. If you ever watch a Daigo play Akuma, you'll notice that in neutral, he does two things a lot. Throw heavy fireball as a poke and press forward medium kick if someone gets a little bit too comfortable in a space. And of course, he's got the anti-airs to back up this play style. That's a very simple yet powerful game plan. In fact, it's so good that it got me to master rank fairly easily, and I'm confident that I could go further just imitating this style. But eventually, as always, I will cap out if I do that. And like the person who wrote into Daigo earlier, I shared the sentiment of wanting more from myself and wanting more for myself. I don't want to be the guy that just makes it out of pools anymore, the guy that peaks at 1700 MR every split. I want to go further. I want more. So what can we do? Well, I think for me personally, this might deviate from what others think and from what we've even spoken about in this video, but imitation feels like a good starting point. The fatal flaw being that I often get stuck here, and instead of it being a starting point, it becomes the end game as well. We have to change that. So up till this point, I've imitated Daigo's Akuma, and I've used 3 attacks, right? Let's start with heavy fireball, for example. What makes it strong? Let's think a little bit differently. Why doesn't Daigo just throw the light one or the medium one, the poke instead? Why is it the heavy one? Why is it so good? Well, it starts up in 12 frames, which is extremely fast for a motion fireball. Sonic Boom starts up in 10 frames, but that's a charge move. And that makes it relatively safe to use as a footsie fireball to poke and hard for the opponent to play around. It also has no hurt box around his hands, which makes it hard to get clipped by random things while you're throwing your fireball. What about forward medium kick? That's the poke that we talked about, right? Why of all buttons is this one so good to use in the mid-range? Well, it starts up in 10 frames, it recovers in 15 on contact and 18 on whiff. That speed combined with the hurt box makes it tough to whiff punish, as well as the fact that it is only -4 on block, but has so much pushback that it is unpunishable by almost everything except for Geef's crouch light kick. Now, as for anti-airs, I've mostly been using heavy DP because it covers the most space, but in the case of things like fireball traps or even certain ranges, most people opt to use medium DP. You usually see people use this instead of this. Well, why is that? Sometimes it's just range dependent, which is pretty self-explanatory, but the other reason is it's also a little bit faster. It gives you more frame advantage on hit and recovers faster, which means you probably get better Oki options off of medium DP. These are things I didn't know if I would not have sat down and looked it up and just stuck to the playstyle that I stole, and I refused to innovate. These are things I just didn't know until right now. Now, we could go through this whole wiki right now, but then we'd kind of be falling into the same trap that we always do, or I always do. So let's just stop here for today. If you're doing this with like a character you already have a playstyle with, or you already have a good foundation with, like if I was doing this with Cammy, I'd probably keep going, right? Because I have more of a foundation, so I know what I'm looking for. But I'm only about 3 days old with Akuma, so I'm just going to stop here. I don't have to learn everything all at once because I understand that it's more important to know why I'm doing something rather than just simply looking for what to do. I hope this video made sense. I hope it helps you. I hope it helps put things into perspective while you're learning a new character or more about your character. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.